All right. First rule of this channel, we not talk about this channel. Second rule of this channel, this is not legal advice. So this is going to be the 2024 fantasy football offseason preview for the Atlanta Falcons. And this one's going to be a little bit fun because it's all about what's it going to cost me to find out. And if it's the right price, then yeah, I'm going to find out. And that's what's going to go on with the Falcons today. We're talking about Drake London being undervalued, Bijan actually being undervalued, and Kyle Pitts being like criminally undervalued relative to finding out what their ranges of outcomes are. And Kirk Cousins is probably appropriately valued in this one overall, if you're wondering into that type of thing. So the Falcons, they fired Arthur Smith because he's bad at football, and they brought in basically the Rams coaching staff like Raheem Morris, Jimmy Lake, and Zach Robinson. Like these are the Rams. So we're talking a lot about Zach Robinson and the offense that the Rams ran last year, because that's what we're kind of expecting that we're going to get out of the Falcons this year. So the Rams last year, they were 10th in passing yards, 11th in rushing yards, and 8th in points for. So that would probably be somewhere along the line of the middle of our expectations for what the Falcons are going to be. If we think that Kirk Cousins and Bijan and Drake London and Kyle Pitts are good at football, and then the Falcons have one of the best offensive lines in football on paper. So like that's just the general way we can start kind of speculating on all this stuff. If you're wondering, last year, as bad as Arthur Smith was, we're only expecting about like 30 more passing yards a game. And then the rushing yards just stay relatively consistent with about 5 more points per game. We're not expecting a lot of change out of, or we're not expecting, such a monumental difference between the offense last year to this year that like, it should be beyond what we should be willing to pay for it. So anyway, moving on, last year, when I'm going to be talking about 580 attempts passing, it's because that's what the Rams did last year. Even if we drop the Falcons down to about like 540, where the Atlanta Falcons were last year at 530, it's more about efficiency at that point than it would be actual volume. Remember, opportunity is king. The queen is efficiency. We're going to be talking a lot about efficiency with these guys too today. So just keep that in mind. I am going to be projecting about like 580 pass attempts. I think that's fair. It's not the Commanders last year leading the league, but it's in the range of like middle of the road to like slightly above that overall. All right, starting off with the Falcons quarterback room. Kirk Cousins, he is my quarterback 19. I moved him up, and I should talk about this real quick. I moved him up from the Matt Stafford range to the Tua and Jared Goff range. I'm just looking up my quarterback rankings real quick. And the reason behind that is he was last year, Kirk Cousins, on pace before the injury in 8 games to have 4,900 yards passing and 38 touchdowns. He would have led the league in both those things. Like, I don't like to pace guys out and say, well, if this would have happened, then that. But that was the case. Matt Stafford, if he had stayed healthy, he would have been on pace in 17 games for 4,500 yards, 27 touchdowns. So again, the range of outcomes, and I can probably pull this up here. Kirk Cousins would have given you like 18.7 points a game. Again, your scoring settings may be different than mine. That would have been like a middle of the road quarterback run. With Matt Stafford last year, with what he was doing on a points per game basis, 16.2. Like, not going to win you a league, not going to lose you a league at that rate. It just becomes cost. And Kirk Cousins theoretically would have the ability to have that high end range of outcomes if they really just like open it up and the Rams are throwing for 5,000 yards. Yeah, he would have the ability to return on investment. Why I'm not expecting that with Matt Stafford this year is because the more I look at Blake Corum, the more I like him, and I think they're going to be much more balanced. And I'm probably even thinking about moving Puka down. That's why I moved Kirk Cousins up and didn't move Matt Stafford into that potential high volume passing offense. Generally, not a good idea to be chasing last year's production. But again, trying to project ahead and just looking at value is a little bit more okay with me when it comes to fantasy football. So Kirk Cousins, going to be projecting him out to about like 4,000 yards passing and, like 25 touchdowns on the season. That's what I'd be expecting him. Is going to have, again, like that range of outcomes to have 4,900 yards passing and 38 touchdowns. I do think that's there. If this offense is like a lot better than expected, probably you're looking at the floor being 2019 Minnesota, like 3,600 yards passing, 26 touchdowns. Like, that's going to be there also. The only outside of 2 quarterback leagues, that's a different conversation. 1 quarterback leagues, the biggest thing that I'd be looking at with Kirk Cousins is stacking him with Drake London or Kyle Pitts. And I still probably would be bringing in one of those quarterbacks like a Will Levis or something like that that has the ability to win me a league. But I at this price, and to bring this up on ESPN, like 112 overall, like yeah, I could just punt and punt and punt and punt and punt, and he would be one of the last guys that I would just be okay with being like, this is my starter for the season. Like getting like 2 touchdown passes a week and moving on with that one. So on Fantasy Pros, he is going 109 overall and quarterback 17. On ESPN, as I just showed everybody, he's going 15, quarterback 15, 112. And on Underdog, he is going at quarterback 18, an ADP of 136. It's fair. Like that's about where he should be going. Just remember, like he's in the bottom tier of those guys, and I can bring up my rankings again, that I would be okay with starting the season if you're in one of those like really cutthroat, like stab you in the back leagues where everybody will start like grabbing 2 quarterbacks, and that's my main money league, just to screw everybody else over. Like he would be in that tier of guys before I really start speculating on potential upside versus like what we know we're probably going to get at that point. All right. Finishing off the quarterback room, Taylor Heineke's back. I think he's okay as a gunslinger, like, not going to be fantasy relevant. Probably will have the ability to not make me really sweat about the guys that I put investment in. 8th overall draft pick, Michael Penix. If Kirk Cousins goes down, I probably would be expecting at this point that they would be pulling the trigger on Michael Penix. If he don't come in, I would imagine that means that the Falcons are in a really bad spot. Like he's just not ready at that point. He should be ready to step in and potentially be a bigger gunslinger than Kirk Cousins down the line. It really just depends on what you think overall. And I do not dislike Michael Penix. It's just going to be a really interesting thing overall, like Kirk Cousins, to be that gunslinger. I do like that a little bit more. All right. Running back room overall, like I said, I moved Bijan up to running back 3. Let me bring up my rankings real quick. And I moved Rachaad White down. And the bigger reason behind this is because I'm expecting Bijan to get the passing work and be a part of a better offense than the Buccaneers down there with Baker May. That's like the biggest thing behind it. Like they're going to be very similar overall to my expectations for receiving work, probably like 500 or 600 yards. I think Bijan has a higher ceiling. He should be the number 3 in the offense in the way that Rachaad White's not going to probably be. Going to have that higher range of outcomes when it comes to that. So if we get better efficiency and Bijan scores more touchdowns, he could theoretically be underrated and be a fantasy MVP this year. So he is going, let me bring this back up. He is going on Fantasy Pros as a running back 3, which is in line with what I have, and 8 overall, which I think is undervalued. Bijan should probably be in that top tier of guys, and I can bring this up on ESPN. He should be in this top tier guys. If I have the 101 to the 104, I don't care which one of these 4 guys I get with CD Lamb. As long as I get one of them, probably should be feeling very good about the start to things for my fantasy season. On Underdog, again, best ball league, he's going running back 2, ADP of 7. I think the ADP of 7 is a little too low. Overall, this is a best ball, wide receiver meta. I think there's going to be so few running backs that can do what some of these guys can do that he should still be relatively in line with those elite type of players. And I don't think after Bijan, we start getting into some other questions when it comes to the ability to have guys that have elite type seasons. I don't think that's necessarily there with Bijan. All right. Tyler Algier, priority cuff. He is going as, I don't even have him ranked overall just because I think the guy that should go out and get Tyler Algier at this point would be the Bijan owner. That's why I would put him here. He's like one of the first like priority cuffs that I should be talking about. Probably has maybe the road to a little standalone value. When I finish talking about Bijan, I'll explain a little bit more. I would be a little bit more concerned with Jace McClellan coming in, the rookie from Alabama, that Tyler Algier could actually get shipped because he's a 5th round guy. He's going in the 3rd year of his contract. There are some teams that need running back, and the Falcons don't need running back at this point. Like, so overall. So I said I'd talk a little bit about Bijan in this one. And I would imagine that he has the range of outcomes to be like Alvin Kamara, this 2017, 2018 type of season. Don't think he's going to get 16 rushing touchdowns to get like 2020, even to like 2021. Like if I'm spending running back 3, I'm getting running back 8. I don't necessarily like that, but that's when we're over the age apex when it comes to running backs. So in this case, I don't necessarily need to get a lot more rushing work out of Bijan. I need those touchdowns and I need those receiving works. So the wide receiver 2 in this offense right now is going to be Darnell Mooney. I don't think that he's better than Bijan. So the guy that I would be expecting to get a majority of the receiving work in this offense to be the de facto like wide receiver 2, the number 3 option in this passing offense would be like Bijan at that point. At this point, I think we can speculate on a league high target share. Like we can get up to like 120. Last year, I am bringing this up. Brees led everybody, all the running backs, when it came to targets at like 95. I can bring this one in. This is not gonna right there. There's Brees at 95. So Bijan was like actually number 2 even in that offense. So I could definitely see that like that's not going to be surprising that he can take like 14 more targets. It's more about the efficiency at that point if he's being used better. Part of the reason why I bring up Tyler Algier is I could definitely see the best 11 personnel that they put on the field is Tyler Algier playing the fullback and Bijan playing like the wing slot that we the fantasy position that we all want, the running back that plays in the slot. That's how I actually could envision this occurring. Probably not to any great large fantasy extent, where Tyler Algier actually like becomes Mark Ingram. I think that's like within Tyler Algier's range of outcomes. It's not something I would be banking on. Probably better running backs to go after. But in this case, what it would allow Bijan to do is be used as the number 2 wide receiver, the slot. So again, this Alvin Kamara type of season, like that's what I would be expecting overall, this 2017 type season. And again, your scoring settings and my scoring settings may be different, but that would put him in line to be a right around like this sub elite tier of running backs at that point with the theoretical upside, if he's being used. And again, with a better offense in general with the Falcons, that means more red zone opportunities. So even if he's not the quote unquote goal line back, that doesn't matter if he's scoring from the 8-yard line on design passing plays or rushing work. So again, better offense means more scoring opportunities. That means more opportunities to score touchdowns. This is the exact reason why I moved Rachaad White out of running back 3 and moved Bijan up. If they're scoring more because Kirk Cousins is better than Baker Mayfield, then I expect at least a couple of those touchdowns to go to Bijan this year over like Tyler Algier or anybody else. Relatively simple at that point. Okay, moving on to the wide receiver room, where we can start breaking this stuff down. So I am expecting Drake London to be about 140 targets of 580 pass attempts, which is about 24%, which would make him about wide receiver 16 overall. So all the way down here in your Chris Olave type of areas, Keenan Allen, Chris Olave type of target share. So I'm not expecting this like magical, like, 160 to 180 targets to manifest for Drake London. Then it becomes an issue of efficiency at that point with Drake London. Is he getting red zone targets? How many of these he can cash in for touchdowns? And then, how actually productive those downfield shots are if he's just like a check down monster, like something like that. That's all that I would be thinking of with Drake London, putting him in a like 140 target range. I'm going to pull this up to put him in probably the range of like a low end wide receiver 1 to a high end or a mid range wide receiver 1. Again, targets overall, apples to apples. I get ESPN to function. Probably down here in this like Jamar Chase. Well, Jamar Chase missed time, but like Chris Olave type of range. So where he's going, I have him out with my wide receiver 10. On Fantasy Pros, he's going 24 overall, wide receiver 14. On Underdog Best Ball League, he is going wide receiver 10, ADP of 14. I think it's a little rich. That's definitely cutting into his upside overall. And then on ESPN, this is where I would want him to be going is wide receiver 35. I actually talked to one of my co-managers today about just going out and getting him and Marvin Harrison at their costs and kind of punting the position in general. But that's about where I would want him to go. And then I would feel better about like jumping up a handful of picks to make sure that I get Drake London with that range of outcomes to primarily be my wide receiver 2 with that upside to win a league. That's how I would view Drake London in general when it comes to that. So again, finishing probably around like 1,200 yards, 80 or 90 receptions, and 7 or 8 touchdowns. That's probably what I'd be expecting him to do, somewhere like 16 to 17 points a game, half PPR, something along those lines. That's what I would be expecting. And if I'm paying like wide receiver 14 prices, like that's an easy smash when I could definitely see that he's wide receiver 10. I do want to talk a little bit about the Sun God in this one. I got to pull up my wide receiver rankings. The reason why I want to talk about this is in order for me to get Drake London to wide receiver 10, I actually moved the Sun God down to wide receiver 12. And that's because, again, we're talking about like competition for opportunity. Drake London, expecting him to be the number one in that offense, number 2, Kyle Pitts, number 3, Bijan, right? And then when we talk about like the Sun God, he may be the number 1, but he's also going to have Laporta, Jameson Williams, and Gibbs. So a little bit, my expectation that Drake London can have a mean of about 1,200 yards as opposed to the Sun God also having 1,200 yards, and then expecting like what are the top end range of outcomes for these two players, the Sun God to get back up to 1,500 yards and then Drake London to get back up to 1,500 yards. I think the road for Drake London to have that elite type season is actually easier than the Sun God without all those opportunities. So moving the Sun God down just generally means that I'm just going to miss him in most leagues. You see, like on this ESPN league, he's going like wide receiver 4, 7 overall. Like, I think that they both probably have about the same mean, and I think that there's a better chance with the way Drake London is going to be used that he can have that elite type season, as opposed to trying to draft last year's production for the Sun God. If that makes any sense. All right, so moving back to the wide receiver room. Darnell Mooney, he comes over on a 3-year, $13 million contract, which is Gabe Davis money. We keep talking about Gabe Davis. There is an out after 2025. And the biggest thing that I would look at with Darnell Mooney, I didn't even have him ranked before this because like I think there's like almost zero road for him to win leagues. For him to theoretically even get close to like a wide receiver 2 ceiling, because I don't think there's a wide receiver 1 ceiling. You're looking at like multiple injuries, like even Bijan would have to come down or to get injured. If Pitts or Drake London get injured, vacated targets tend to go to running backs. So like Bijan's just going to get more of those targets. It's probably not going to go to Darnell Mooney if either one of those two guys goes down. That's why I would probably have him at wide receiver 60. He's going 70 overall on Fantasy Pros, 170 overall, wide receiver 70 on best or Underdog. He's going at like wide receiver 68, 149 overall. And then on ESPN, he's going at 123, wide receiver 51, which I think is a little bit ridiculous. And again, there's just guys that I would rather be throwing my darts at and be wrong with than expecting that I can get like maybe a road to a wide receiver 2 type of ceiling. Maybe in some weird leagues, like, he's going to have value as a wide receiver 3. He's definitely going to have the range in this offense to have like 2021 when he was with the Bears. Probably not going to get 81 receptions, but I could definitely see him flirting with 1,000 yards and like 7 touchdowns, being that guy on the outside. And with all this is that they brought in 6th rounder Casey Washington from Illinois. I watched him. I think he's a better football player than he is an athlete. And what that means is with Drake London being 6'4", 213 and Darnell Mooney being 5'11", 177, those 2 wide receiver sets, like I could definitely see my money would be, I should put it this way. My money would be that Casey Washington probably has the best chance to be the de facto wide receiver 2 in this offense in those 2 wide receiver sets. And going back to the running back room, this is why I brought it up a certain way. If we're looking at like our best 11 guys on the field, for Bijan and Drake London and Kyle Pitts, that means and Kyler Algier, that would mean that like I could definitely see Casey Washington getting the highest amount of snaps by the end of the season from as the wide receiver 2 in this offense. That's just something to be paying attention to. If he'll block, and remember this Rams offense with Puka and Cooper Kupp, those guys block. That the number 2 in this offense has to run block for the offense to work. That's what I would be expecting overall in this one. And then if you're worried about Rondale Moore, like, he wasn't relevant in Arizona. I don't know how he becomes relevant in Atlanta. He would be competing with targets with probably like Bijan at that point, and I would rather be getting Bijan the ball more than Rondale Moore. I could definitely see that like maybe he's got a wide receiver 3 range of outcomes. Probably going to be the guy that's vulturing opportunity from other guys in this offense overall. But that's how I definitely would see it breaking down. All right. Tight end room, Kyle Pitts. He is my tight end 6. He is 7 overall on Fantasy Pros 83. And then on Underdog, he is going tight end 6, ADP 60, which I think is better. And then ESPN, whatever they're smoking, He is tight end 10, 88 overall, right next to Dallas Goedert and TJ Hawkinson. Kyle Pitts, yes, he's got the range of outcomes to be tight end 1 on the season. Probably going to be mid-range guy. I would put him at about 140 targets, which would put him in line to be apples to apples, the tight end 2 in overall targets. With Evan Ingram. If I gave him 140 targets, going back to this one, that would make him the number 1 target earner when it came to number 1 when it came to overall target share with their offense with Evan Ingram. Just to realize how high I'm pushing up Kyle Pitts as probably a mean at this point. And I would probably put all the tight ends and that top tier somewhere around like 900 yards, 7 touchdowns. Kyle Pitts probably closer to 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns, expecting him to be the number 2 in the offense overall with Kirk Cousins. So that would just be the easy way to look at Kyle Pitts. I don't know how he disappoints. I have, where's it at? I have Jake Ferguson right here as tight end 9, which I think is undervalued because he projects to be the number 2 in in Dallas at 900 yards and 7 touchdowns. So Kyle Pitts should be slightly higher than that as the number 2 attached to Atlanta with Kirk Cousins. That's just how I would roll. Kyle Pitts, better athlete than Jake Ferguson on that one overall. Probably just going to be an efficiency problem. Like the hardest thing for us to figure out is those red zone opportunities, how many go to who and how efficient they are in returning on that between Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Bijan at that point. And then how much vulturing we're going to get from Tyler Algier would be a question overall. But yeah, that's about all I think I got when it comes down to this. And yeah,